Welcome to the 10th episode of Renegade Thinkers Live, a show that promises to be long on marketing insights and short on overhyped buzzwords. We'll be drinking in the latest tactics and the coolest gin. Yep, this may be the only live marketing show that features a gin tasting. This show is being live streamed via our friends at Restream, and if you like to drink along at home, today we are featuring Waterloo number 9 gin. There, I'm holding it up, Waterloo number 9 gin. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, live from my home studio here in New York City. Lest you had any doubt, mission number 1 for you, the marketer, is to differentiate your brand from your competitors. Without differentiation, your brand is not a brand. It's a commodity, and you'll find yourself in a race to the bottom in terms of pricing. With differentiation, you have pricing power. With differentiation, you have shorter sales cycles and less churn. With differentiation, you have an easier time recruiting and retaining employees. That in turn becomes a virtuous circle because these employees help you sustain your competitive advantage. Now, differentiation comes in many shapes and colors, some of which are emotional perceptions built over time. You know, the old, I just like them better, I trust them more. And others are more tangible in terms of product performance, like faster or more agile, or service performance, more reliable, more responsive. The ultimate form of differentiation for B2B brands is category creation. When you set about to be in a class by yourself, and if you're viewing right now, you're going, finally, he's getting to the point. Yes, the point of this show is we're going to be talking about category creation. Think Salesforce and CRM, HubSpot and inbound marketing. Creating your own category is also fraught with challenges and ironies. The challenge is that you have to do a lot of educational work. You have to commit to selling the category versus selling your brand. And the irony is it's not really a category until you have competitors and someone with authority, usually analysts, say it's a category. Which brings us to today's show, in which we will dive into the nitty-gritty challenges of category creation with 3 awesome guests. And wow, okay, got through that and I'm ahead of schedule. So first up is Chip Rodgers, the CMO of WorkSpan, star of Renegade Thinkers Unite, episode 177. Chip, thank you for being here. How are you?
Hey, Drew, I'm great. Great. Thank you for having me on. This is going to be a terrific session. I'm really excited.
Well, excited to have you here as well. And let's get started with the category that you're creating at WorkSpan. Can you describe it in a few words?
Sure. So we're in the B2B space and really with technology companies. One of the challenges that people have had is that the world is really changing, and it used to be that if you were a software company, a hardware company, you would sell everything through resellers direct, to a channel, and that's been the model for 20 or 30 years. And with the cloud, everything completely has changed, and you're no longer selling. Well, you can be doing reselling, but there's a lot more what's called co-selling, and it's around ecosystems model, and having different kinds of partners working together to build a solution, bring it to market, and then co-sell with your partners. That's a completely different way of working with partners. And there hasn't been, what's been happening since then is just everybody's doing everything on spreadsheets, literally. So it's a really different kind of approach to partnering. People have been muddling along, and WorkSpan has built a solution to optimize that, to automate it, to build it all in a cloud and build it in a network so that all partners can work with each other.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because there's so many products or services that sort of the competition is a spreadsheet, right? I mean, and it's hilarious, which is the way they've been doing business. And so you're presenting a different way of doing business, which involves changing behavior. And though that's hard. And so I'm wondering, how long, if you, first of all, do you have a name for your category?
Yes, it's called Ecosystem Business Management.
EBM, because it has to have initials. I mean,
it's got to have initials.
All right, so you've
and
established
only
this
3
category. And would you say that, is the category established?
It is. Yeah, we have all the analysts have been calling it. We've been working with analysts for a long time. Companies are seeing it. We're seeing huge thought leaders like Accenture and Accenture Research talking about how ecosystems are the new wave. We're seeing a lot of momentum, and we're seeing competitors coming in as well, which I know we're going to talk about as well.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, it isn't a category as much as you want it to be. It isn't a category until the analysts say it's a category, which is hilarious. And then it isn't a category until you got competition, which is annoying. But somehow you have to sort of embrace the idea, if you're the first one in there, that you're going to get the largest share. How long did it take you? You said a long time. How long did it take you from deciding you were in fact a new category to getting an analyst to agree?
So we started this journey back in May of 2018. In fact, I in preparation for this conversation, I brought up our original category creation plan, May of 18. And we are our 2 co-founders, actually 3 co-founders, sat down and said, "Look, this is what we're doing is something that's very different, and let's figure out how we get the word out and bend everybody's mind to this new way of thinking about things."
Interesting. Okay. So, well, one might argue that under 2 years is not a long time, except for if you're in Silicon Valley, which I know you are. That's like, you could have sold the company 4 times in the period of 2 years. You're not quite a light speed billionaire yet, but, and I love the fact that there's a plan there. And I think we'll end up circling back to some of those elements, but that clearly you had a thought that there's a playbook here for developing a plan. Maybe you could give one insight before we bring on the next guest. What were kind of the preliminary steps that you needed to take to get this category off the ground?
So, I think one of the things that is critically important is, it really needs to be something different. So
it has to be. It really does need to be something.
it needs to be different. So, but no, I think putting the plan together, and I credit our co-founders for sort of thinking through the process. And my boss, Amit Sinha, had been with SAP for many years and had done created a category with SAP with HANA. And so we took, kind of used a lot of those learnings and the process to really put the plan together, and then it was executing. So working with analysts and kind of bringing people around to this new way of thinking.
All right, we're going to bring Gabi in now. Gabi Zijderveld, CMO at Affectiva, and also Renegade Thinkers Unite star, episode 106. Hello, Gabi.
Hey, Drew. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. And particularly excited to have you, not only because you're a category creator, but you're also a big gin fan, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But when you and I talked about category creation back in the fall of 2018, when we did our podcast together, you talked about having created the emotion AI category. Was there a moment where you sort of realized that you had done that?
Yeah, I think the moment actually was when Gartner came out with a report that I think the exact title was Emotion AI, the Competitive Landscape. And that was also after a good year of having conversations with Gartner on the topic and being very consultative to them on the category. But for us, that really solidified like, hey, we have done it.
Which is amazing. And so you talk about it, there was a year between getting the analyst getting them involved in this conversation over and over and over again to bring them along. And I know there's some pride of authorship with the analysts. They like to name these categories, and they often they want to be the first one. So you're giving them something they want to be able to do. On the other hand, they have to believe it. And like Chip said, it's got to be real. So what if sort of some of the things that happened after that? I guess we could talk about what were some of the milestones, or what have you done to maintain that you're the leader in this world?
Yeah, and actually, I'll add a little bit about what we did also before
Sure.
getting Gartner to that point, because we had spent a lot of time developing our talk track. I think we were a little bit less methodical than Chip in saying, okay, we're going to create a category and this is how we're going to do it. This is our plan. But we spent a lot of time on the messaging and positioning, and that is what I consistently brought to Gartner. But in the meantime, and this was also a multi-pronged approach we took, really, we were getting a lot of inbound press interest from the big publications, the newspapers, to the trade industry, trade press, to tech press. So we were, at the same time that I was having these conversations with Gartner, we were also having these same conversations with reporters, and we started seeing this noise bubbling up around our space, and people starting to use this terminology, emotion AI, that we had started. So I think our biggest challenge, kind of getting back to your question after this Gartner report that more or less kind of put the seal of approval on it, if you will, I think our biggest challenge was to stay focused and stay with our narrative. And especially for our CEO, who was really my thought partner in all of this, she felt like, okay, I'm constantly going on stage talking about the same thing and talking about this emotion AI thing. We need to come up with something new. And I'm like, no, we need to be consistent. Let's stick with it. It was very detailed, though. It was really all about, what is emotion AI? Why does it exist? What's the need? Why did we create this? Who cares? How does it work? There's a lot to be said about the ethics of it all. Where is it being used today, and where do we see it going in the future? And that was really consistently what we kept talking about. And then you build in the proof points.
And it's sort of this narrative of which is really, and it's interesting because, and we'll get it when Chip rejoins us, there was a difference. They set out from the beginning to create this. That's what the company was started for. Yours was a journey, and I really enjoyed your bosses. Rana's book. And her journey in and of itself is just such an incredible, woman from Egypt who is an engineer, and literally her PhD was about creating the first sort of software that could read emotion. So certainly you had your bona fides in the thing. What do you think? So maybe give us one more milestone or thing that sort of Gartner does it. What is the benefit, I guess, of having this motion AI attached to your brand?
Well, I think the benefit is really that it creates a lot of inbound demand and client credibility with clients. At the end of the day, that's why it matters. I will also say, I think for us, the timing was really right, because there was this renewed AI wave, right? And everyone was beginning to ride the AI wave. Every new company was doing AI, but we built a very credible narrative that proved why this is really AI. And part of the narrative was talking about our deep learning and how we collect and annotate data to train our machine learning models and to validate them, and all that technical stuff that goes with it. There
you go. All right. So we're gonna bring on Bernd, and then our next guest, and we'll bring everybody back for a conversation. So hello, Bernd. Bernd Ledger is a veteran tech CMO with category creation experiences at Nexthink, and I think you had it at some previous companies as well. Bernd, first of all, how are you? Oh, you're on mute. We got to unmute you.
So sorry about that. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, it's great to have you. And so when you're thinking about category creation, it's not it's not like you can wave a magic wand and say, hey, we're a category unto ourselves. Where does the process start, at least with your experience at Nexthink, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for me, it's like my third go around in creating a category. So I've done it at CloudLock, at Checkmarks, and now at Nexthink. And I would just also want to say, category creation is not for everyone. You don't necessarily have to create a category. And in many markets, it's perfectly reasonable not to try to define your own category. But in many cases, it is valuable to create your own category. So where I've started typically is you define a group of people who want to be involved and who should be involved in the category design. And I would also say in many cases, it's not always category creation. In some cases, it could be a category redefinition. For example, at Checkmarks, we were in a space that had been around for 15 to 20 years. And what we required there was to redefine the requirements and the needs of the marketplace. And I think that really shifted our trajectory and how we were able to change the fortunes of the company moving forward.
So where do you start? And it's interesting. I definitely see the distinction. But the nice thing about, as I mentioned earlier, if you in fact do create a category and you become known for it and that category has value, you're just instantly you are the authority in the category. I mean, right. You would not go to XYZ brand to talk about inbound marketing. You would go to HubSpot, right? That is the source. They created that idea. So let's take Nexthink, for example. First of all, what category did you create?
Yeah, Nexthink is the category we've created is called Digital Employee Experience. So the space is all about organizations helping their employees to really optimize their experience and their journeys. So everything from how you're able to work from home in a remote working environment to do you have everything that you need to be successful at work? And it's all from a digital experience perspective. So like your laptop, your both the quantitative and the qualitative aspects of your workplace. And the market, we're kind of at the point where similar to Chip and to Gabi, we're at that point where the analysts are now recognizing that this is a space. So for the first time, Forrester has adopted a wave that is now stating that this is a market, and Gartner is at that point as well. So that is that external validation we've been looking for.
And when Forrester does that, is this like a moment where you're doing your infinite happy dance? I mean,
well, as long as you're the leader in the wave, I think you're doing the happy dance. And in our case, that was the case. I think part of, and you had asked Gabi as well, what are the benefits? I think some of the key benefits are that you're able to redefine the requirements. And I think that is a magic moment when you're able to say, this is what it takes for an organization to satisfy the needs of your buyers. And when you get to that point where your requirements become the de facto standards for the industry, that's when you're doing the happy dance. And clearly, having a Forrester state that we're a leader in this space is a critical component of that.
And I'm just imagining I'm going immediately to a buyer's guide where you list all the things that you should be looking for. And of course, you're the only ones who have it. So because you defined it, right?
100%.
That's it. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Is there, after you get the analyst to agree, how do you sort of maintain your sort of leadership? What do you need to do to keep it going?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with continued thought leadership. So in our case, we're working extremely heavily on making sure we have compelling content. So we want to become the destination for, in our case, head of end user computing professionals for them to get educated on the marketplace. So it's not just about our solutions, but it's basically becoming the destination for people to learn. You mentioned HubSpot, and I think that's what HubSpot did really well. They not just coined the term inbound marketing, but they became the destination for people to learn how to do it. And I think that's similar in our case. From an ongoing perspective, we want to be that destination for people to learn about digital employee experience.
Right. Okay. Let's bring Gabi and Chip back. And while they're joining us, I have a question. Hey, Google, what is category design?
According to Wikipedia, category design is a business strategy and discipline that helps companies create, develop, and dominate new categories of products and services. Category design extends beyond the leadership team's narrower focus on products, company culture, and business models.
Okay, so that's interesting. Company culture and business models. We haven't really talked about that as part of this notion of category creation. Have you guys been thinking about that at all in terms of how does that extend into your thinking? Did Google give us some fresh thinking here?
Yeah, I think the culture is interesting. But Chip, go ahead, please.
No, I think it is about really sort of reshaping the thinking and having a strong point of view, right? Which is part of how one of the things that we did actually when we started this journey and meeting with analysts is we had sessions with analysts, briefing sessions with analysts and we built sort of a talk track around the founder's, story and what led them to create take this crazy startup journey, right? Because it's never easy but they had both been through a lot of the pain. And so it sort of helped, just telling that story says, oh, this is really interesting that these guys, had this problem and they went out to go solve it and build something to because they knew or figured that other people had the same issue. And so I think that sort of that's ingrained in everything at the company. And so it is part of our culture.
And interesting, it is sort of a founder's myth, sort of part of this category creation. And in many ways, Gabi, with the book that Rana did, it's the same kind of thing. Here's the journey that brought us here that makes it feel so important and legit, and it gives you a backstory. And I think that's a fascinating part of this and a nuanced part of it. There could be an impression that you just wave a magic wand and poof, you have a category, because we can think of and name so many of them, but we know that it isn't. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what's the hardest part of this? And maybe Gabi, you could start. What is the hardest part of creating a category?
I think there's actually a lot of hard parts to it. I think for us as a small company, it was really quite critical that we kind of stuck with the narrative, because especially as a startup, right, and you have applicability across many industries, it's really easy to get distracted and keep your focus away from that talk track that Chip also referred to. I think also with a small team and just super tiny budgets, just slugging it out and being super creative. I agree totally with what Bernd said around thought leadership and all the content development that needs to go around it. So I think for us, it was very much about being resourceful and crafty and just getting a lot of things done, from the content to all the events we would speak at, to managing the press, to managing the analysts. And a big aspect, and it started off, it was challenging, but then we got momentum, was really ecosystem development. So building alliances and partnerships with companies adjacent to us or simpatico to us, and getting them on board and getting them to start telling our story as well, because we found a way that it benefited them as well. And that really got it moving for us.
Interesting. Well, that plays right into Chip's world of ecosystems. But Bernd, I'm curious from you. You've done this 3 times now. What would you say are the hardest part of category creation from your experience?
Yeah, I think from my experience, the hardest part is when your CEO says, hey, let's create a category. And then the notion is that this is a marketing-led initiative or a CEO-led initiative. And I think that's a recipe for failure. What I found is that typically this has to be driven throughout the entire organization, and it has to be adopted by the entire teams. And I'll give you an example of that. In our case at Checkmarx, it actually happened that we didn't just take what the product did and we kind of redefined that. We actually helped define the product strategy by creating a definition of the category that influenced where our product was going as well. So it does take a village to raise a child, and I think it's important that it's not seen as a marketing or a C-level initiative, that it's really seen as a cross-functional initiative where the entire company has to chip in, and kind of coming back to content or like even sharing on social and you talked about culture, like that has to be ingrained in the entire DNA from hiring to what all different teams work on a continuous basis.
Yeah, because suddenly you have a North Star where you're saying this is where we're going. If you guys are on, you better be on board with this. And I think it speaks to what Google was sharing with us as well, as you said, Bernd, it's about the culture. All right, we're gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna do a little plug here for CMO Huddles, and we launched CMO Huddles in 2020. It's an invitation-only subscription service that brings together an elite group of CMOs to share, care, and dare each other to greatness. One CMO described a huddle as a cross between an expert workshop and a therapy session. Chip, Gabi, what does that match with your experience?
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Gabi.
I remember in the early days of the pandemic shutdown, so exactly a year ago, I think in March, right? We had our huddle, and it was a weekly thing at the time because I think everyone was just like, what are we going to do? And just being able to share these best practices, but do it in a circle of trust, right? With honesty and vulnerability. And then, of course, the Black Lives Movement was taking place, and we had some really profound conversations about that. I love the description, right? Because it's learning, but it is a good therapy session as well, especially in those days when we were figuring this pandemic out. Yeah,
that was amazing. And Chip?
Absolutely, it's been great to really connect with these CMO huddles, and both in. We now have monthly sessions like this where 8 to 10 to 12 will join together and just talk, share ideas and challenges. What's working, what's not working, where what technology is working, what new approaches, what are some measurement benchmarks and things like that we throw out. And Drew, you do an amazing job of capturing all the notes and then putting it out in an email that is anonymized, right? So you don't say who said what, but you really capture the things that happen. And then you've also created this Slack group, and people are in there now all the time, sharing ideas, and so it's terrific program. Really good.
I love it. Thank you, guys. It's great. If you're a B2B CMO that can share and care with the best of them, visit cmohuddles.com. Okay. All right. We are just a couple minutes away from the gin tasting, but where does analysts, so we've talked a little bit about how analysts fit into this whole thing. We've all said they're really important. But one question that's sort of come up, and it came up in a huddle, is do you classify the expense of marketing to analysts as brand work or demand gen work? Because we know that those budgets really matter, because one of them is always up for grabs and the other one is, you can't touch the demand gen. So any thoughts on that?
I have a weird one here to share, if I may. For us, it's been mostly brands, but so I've built really great relationships with, especially one analyst over at Gartner, a lady over in Germany, and we've just had really good conversations, very consultative, and I would even advise her on, hey, you're missing these competitors of ours that really should be in your report, right? So not just like touting our own story and our own company. But here's the thing, as a startup, especially this year with my budget getting cut, I can't afford Gartner at all. So then I used to get courtesy copies of the reports that I would spend hours working on, and they changed their whole policy. So even if I spend hours with them, I don't even get a courtesy copy anymore. So it is bizarre. And they offered me startup pricing, which is prohibitive for startups without a budget. So
that's ironic.
It's very strange.
Yeah. Chip, Bernd, any more thoughts on sort of just analyst management and relationships and keeping those things going?
I just have a habit. I put a tickler in and try, every month I have a list of about maybe 15 or 20 between, Gartner, Forrester, IDC, Constellation, that I just try and, maybe it's a customer story, a win, or some new, way something that we've come out with that's, even just a slide that just says, "Hey, this is really interesting. Thought you'd like," and then just, to keep the relationship going, have them have a continued sense of, the direction that things are going and the momentum.
And you're really becoming a trusted source of information for them, and a consistent one over time. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Can I add one comment, Drew?
Oh, go ahead, Bernd.
I was going to say, I think one kind of recommendation I would have in regards to building the category is finding that analyst who is out there who wants to build a brand for him or herself as well. Like in many cases, you're working with analysts who are not the leading edge. They're kind of the lagging indicator for where markets are going. So if you can identify a couple or that one analyst who is on board with your vision and who will go along with you to make a name for him or herself, that's been a good recipe for success for me and currently at Nexthink and in the past as well.
Yeah. Good suggestion.
What a great suggestion. And I love that, because any time that you can help someone else build their brand in this world, you've earned a lot of brownie points. Yeah. All right. We're gonna take a break, and there's a video that's gonna go. I gotta go get my gin out of the freezer in my cool glass. But stay with us. We're coming right back. Watch this video. It's very funny.
All right, guys, we need some ideas. We got crushed last quarter. We have to change something.
How about a focus group?
Not now, Todd. We need
spending too much
money.
We need to spend less
money.
Can we get a visual for that?
Okay, so right now we're spending this much money. What if we start spending this much money?
What if we spent less money and only one line through it?
You cut out a whole line.
Manufacturing line.
That's brilliant. No manufacturing.
No manufacturing.
We won't make any of the furniture. We'll let them make the furniture.
Yes. DIY.
Oh, people love DIY. Pinterest. Wait, hold on. No, because we have to give them tools.
One tool.
But we make it cheaper.
An Allen wrench.
One Allen wrench puts together all the furniture.
People will hate it, but we love it.
And because they're going to assemble it, we can pack it smaller. Little boxes, big warehouse. All you need. Yes. Oh, wait. But when they show up to the warehouse, they won't know which box to get.
Showroom.
Yes, the whole place is just a showroom.
At my last job, we would
Shut up, Todd.
Todd, please. This one Halloween, I went to a corn maze.
Corn maze.
All right. Well, you can watch the rest of that video. We had to get one more "Shut Up, Todd" in there. It ends quite humorously with the discovery of IKEA. But now we are moving into a very special section. We are going to be tasting Waterloo number 9 gin. And by the way, it's very exciting. We actually have a special treat. The Waterloo's distiller is here with us. Courtney Dymowski is joining us. Courtney, where are you?
Hi, Drew. I'm here at our distillery over in Dripping Springs, Texas.
Cool. All right. Well, welcome. And so let's bring back the rest of the guests here. This is a moment of truth where we all get to taste this. But while we're doing this, Courtney, if you wouldn't mind, first, what should we be tasting? What should be the obvious sort of part of this taste?
Yeah, so Waterloo number 9 is going to be our flagship gin. And on first taste, you'll notice that it's pretty unique to any sort of gin. It is not going to be your typical kind of harsh juniper style, which would be a London dry gin. It's fairly contemporary. And so you'll notice a ton of floral notes to it. We add a lot of lavender in our botanical bill. And then we also have a really nice citrus backbone that's super light and has effervescence.
A citrus backbone. Chip, did you get the citrus backbone?
I got it. It's really delightful.
It is. Really. And Gabi, I know you're a huge gin fan. Weigh in here. What are you tasting? Some of the botanicals? Got the coriander?
Yes, I think it's amazing. It's delicious. Kind of a little bit of minerality for me. I don't know where that's coming from, but I love it. It's great. I'm gonna take another sip.
By the way, I love the back of the bottle. It's a nice little drawing there. Is that a juniper bush?
Yeah, it's going to be a juniper branch. And then it has a couple of our other different botanicals kind of interlaced in that drawing as well.
So one of the botanicals that you had listed is pecans, and we don't think of this. And so one part of the tradition of this show is we have a fellow renegade, in this case Nicole, do a little homework on this. So Nicole, pecan is a little bit of an unusual botanical. What's the story? Do we have any fun facts about pecans?
Yes, I do actually. So you may think that a pecan is a nut, but it's actually a drupe, which is a fruit with a single stone or a pit surrounded by a husk. So it's in the same family as a peach or a plum, but we eat the seed inside instead of the fruit.
Who knew? It's a drupe. Who even knew there was a drupe? Very exciting. All right. So, and give us, how about any other things? Is there anything else that we should know about, Courtney, about your distillery or your process or anything else that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so Waterloo number 9 is going to be, we're based just outside, our distillery is based just outside of Austin, Texas. We've gathered all of our botanicals to be indicative of the area we're in, which is the hill country of Texas. So we have tons of lavender, pecan, and grapefruit growing here, which is highlighted in this gin. We've named the gin Waterloo and our brand Waterloo after the township that was Waterloo, Texas, which is now known as Austin. So Austin's original name was Waterloo. And then the main other fact with our gin is we vapor distill it. So instead of kind of throwing botanicals in the pot and steeping them in the still dam, we throw all of our botanicals up in the column of our still. And so that's going to create a much lighter experience for a gin and not kind of as like heavy or robust or punchy in flavor. But something just really nice, light, and enjoyable for our hot Texas summers.
Hot Texas winters. Well, I absolutely love it, and I love the brand story. Was very curious about Waterloo. Any final comments, Chip, Bernd, Gabi, on enlightening the folks who are not getting a chance to taste this right now?
What a pleasure! What a pleasure it is. It's so good. It's brings a warmth to your belly right away. It's amazing.
Love it.
Really
Love
wonderful, wonderful flavors, and the you know, I'm not a gin aficionado, but in the wine side of things, it would be maybe the nose, but it's really a nice smell as you're drinking it. And I'm on the West Coast. It's only 1 o'clock in the afternoon here, so I'm going a little bit easy, but I'll have some more later.
I will tell you that I almost feel like it's unusual in that there's a ricochet-like flavor in your mouth. It sort of bounces around. There's so many interesting things going on, which I think makes it unusual. All right. Well, we have other things to cover in the show. Unless, Gabi, you have a last word. Thank you, Courtney, for joining us. It's a pleasure to meet you. Good luck with everything. And out there, everybody else out there, check it out. Waterloo number 9. How can you forget it? Think ABBA. All right. All right. Moving on. I could drink that all day, except that would be bad.
Yeah, I'm going to throw mine into G&T because otherwise I won't make it to the end of the
Yes,
day.
exactly. All right. So knowing how hard it is to create a category, think about what would you do differently this time? If you could start again with your respective categories, what would you do differently? Who wants to take that?
I would say for me, it's setting expectations in the right way. Like category creation takes time. It's not a short-term initiative. It takes time. And I think just setting expectations internally that it's going to take time, like we talked about the analyst community. This isn't something where an analyst is going to switch over his or her thoughts in 6 months. It could take a year, it could take 2 years, it could take 3 years. And just like making sure you're setting expectation sets the right way, I think that creates just better alignment, that you're in it for the long haul.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point, because if you sort of start down this road and say, and then you try to pivot, and Gabi, you'd reference that as staying focused on it. And so that's one. Chip, knowing again what you know now versus 2 years ago, what would you do differently?
I think Bernd's suggestion actually is a good one, which is, it takes time. And I don't know that we would do anything differently other than, it's we get impatient.
Yeah, who doesn't, right?
Come on.
Yeah, let's do this. Come on, we're a category, damn it. Everybody else get with it.
Well, and for a while as we were maybe, kind of a year into it, we had good recognition from analysts and others that, that this was something that was really different. But I think getting back, to Gabi's point, and Drew, you said this as well, until you have, you can't have a category of one, right? So it really, that's part of what takes time, is not just the thought leaders, but to have everyone's kind of come around and say, all right, well, there's an opportunity here.
Right.
Let's go jump into it and start building something. So that's one of the things that takes a while to really make it, turn into a category. So.
And Gabi?
Yeah, one thing that struck me when Bernd was saying, providing that observation on managing expectations, and what I realized was that my CEO and I had very different perspectives on, I think, maybe what came down to success, because I was kind of doing a little bit of that joy dance, more so when our competitors started copying us than even that Gartner report. Because I felt like, okay, when these companies are shifting their narrative and are mimicking their website and their messaging to be ours, that means we are doing something right.
Yeah.
Gartner can say all they want, because what was mentioned earlier, there's also a stake in it for the analysts, right, to build their own brand. So they might attach to something like that. But whereas I was doing that joy dance, our CEO was freaking out. She's like, how can they do that? We created it. I'm like, no, it's good. Good. It means we're onto something. Stay the course.
Yeah, and so that sort of begs the question as we're thinking about this. It's not a category till our competitors come along, and obviously they see what you're doing because you're the one who started the conversation. And if they copy it directly, which happens, we've all seen it happen, what's the play then? Because I'm curious, because it's sort of like, we know that the way free market works is someone creates an opportunity, other people follow in, and in the old rule, there'd be 3 profitable companies in a category, and then everybody else is competing for scraps on price. But what's the play, and do you have to keep redefining the category a little bit to stay ahead?
So I think in our case, it's really 2 things. One is the company was founded 4.5 years ago. We have put a lot of energy and resources and time and thought into engineering, into product design and engineering. It'll take, even if someone already, gets the idea and tries to do it, it's going to take, a couple of years just to go try and build something like this. The other is the network, and with WorkSpan, we have some really big customers, SAP, Intel, Microsoft, Citrix, Cisco, and as soon as you get more partners and more companies in this, we're built as a network. So once you have that network built, then it's like LinkedIn. Is there another LinkedIn? There's no other LinkedIn. So that becomes the moat as well, is that someone else needs to go create their own network.
Right. So you built in sort of sustainable competitive advantage in that we design it into the product, and this network, which sort of again increases the value of the product, because yours is an ecosystem business. So you better have a large ecosystem. Curious, yeah. Bernd, how does this align with the way you've thought about evolving the categories that you've been in?
Yeah, I would agree with Chip. There's certainly an element of you have to have strong product differentiation and an investment in engineering to ensure that you have that competitive differentiation. I also agree with Chip on the ecosystem play, like looking at yourself in a way of how can you attach yourself to adjacent spaces or to adjacent partnerships of other organizations who think like-minded and who can help to further your cause. We talked a little bit about the content side and that thought leadership aspect, and you can differentiate that way. And the last thing I'll say is what we've done successfully over in multiple companies now is leveraging your customer base as well and having your customers speak on your behalf. So things that we've invested in heavily are things like Gartner Peer Insights or G2 Crowd, where you're letting your customers speak on your behalf. So you have like this multi-pronged approach of you have the analyst community who are manifesting your leadership, you have your customers manifesting your leadership, and then you have your ecosystem manifesting your leadership. And that combined helps to really create that differentiation in the marketplace that hopefully will keep your competitors at bay.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought up customers in this conversation, because obviously there is no category without customers, and ultimately customers need to feel that they're an important part of this. And I know from other sort of communities of creation, there's a sense of proprietariness that a customer that has sort of discovered and is an early adopter feels toward a category. They go like, yeah, we got that early. We're part of this thing. Yeah. And they become literally customer champions, which is sort of the best thing. And so you see that in this world, and I could use inbound. It started with a few people and now there's thousands, right? And you sort of get to this place where your community can do a lot of the work for you. All right, this is the moment in the show where I always ask Dr. Benjamin Franklin what he would say to this whole thing of category creation. And what I would focus on with what Ben always focused on is if you worked hard, you would accomplish a lot. This was a early to bed, early to rise prescriber, didn't necessarily live that way. But anyway, so if we think about it, we could summarize his thoughts on this in 4 words: industry needs, not wish. And what he's saying is if you work hard enough, you're not wishing because you're doing it, right? And what you guys have described is you're really working hard. It's not just about saying, hey, we're a category, Emotion AI, hashtag, we're done. We've been talking about product and product enhancement. We've been talking about partnership. We've been talking about culture and all those things that you need to do to really be a legitimate category creator. So we talked a little bit about customer competition. I'm curious if any of you have had situations where you felt a competitor just went too far, or you had to smack them down, or they tried to copy you and it didn't work.
A little bit, but I think what we have noticed is that in client engagement, and we've had a few competitive wins where we got accounts that we basically took away from our competitors. I think, and this is such an age-old adage, right? But you become a partner to your client, right? It's very consultative, collaborative, and we hear over and over again that ultimately they choose us because we don't just throw our technology over the fence. We really work with them, people, to get them successful. And of course, in the long run, that's not how you scale your business. But I think especially in the early days of creating this category and wanting to maintain your leadership, that is super important. So that's been something that's made a difference for us.
So as I'm thinking about this and looking at the 3 of you as CMOs who have had this experience of category creation, how sort of as you look at that, is that like an insurance policy on your resumes, in the sense that there's always going to be, and again, Bernd, you've done this several times now, that there are always going to be brands that are going to want to do this. And do you see that as sort of part of your personal brand now?
In my case, I do. I think that it's something that I see highly in demand. I think regardless if we call it a category or category creation, category design, or if it's a matter of positioning your company for success, I think that's a critical skill set that every CMO should have. So I do think it's a skill set that helps us as practitioners enormously in how we differentiate ourselves or how we help companies to succeed. So I would say absolutely.
Yeah, and the only comment I would add to that, Drew, is, you know, I touched on it earlier. It actually has to be something new, right? You can't just say, "Oh, we're going to hire this person and they're going to create a," you know. So it's got to be a good combination of things to make it work.
It's got to be real, and I think that's such a good point. And there's a lot of sense in the marketing world that it's smoke and mirrors, and that you can sort of come up with a positioning and boom, then it's just a few words here. And what we're really talking about is something quite substantive. And so if you, I guess what you're saying is be wary of the company that says, hey, CMO, come create a category. And then you start digging and you say, no, you're no different than anybody else. There's no there. So that is an interesting point. Well, let's look ahead for a second. Do you think that more brands are going to seek to create their categories? You see that? And again, I'll go to you, Bernd. Do you see this as a bigger trend? I mean, it wasn't very hard to find the three of you creating categories. I know I had Anthony Kanata, who had done it at Gainsight and was doing it again. Is this something that you see happening over and over again?
Well, I think Chip brings up a really interesting aspect, which is you have to have something unique. And as I said earlier, like category creation is not for every company. Like in some cases, it's perfectly fine to like tackle an existing market, because category creation by definition means you have to create something new, and new means that you're redefining something. So it's an interesting aspect. I do think I see a lot of interest in category creation overall. And like I said, if it's category creation or if it's redefining or repositioning your organization for success, it's a very similar skill set that I think is important.
Interesting. And I'm going to go back to some very basic marketing thoughts as we come to a close here. One thing,
just one quick thing we haven't really touched on, but I think the other aspect that's important is, and I think Bernd, you're touching on it, is that if you want to have create a company that is going to thrive and expand and really launch, it has to not only be unique, but it also has to be tied to a larger trend. So it needs to be something that's really important, where, you know, I mean, in our case, it was the move to cloud, you know, public APIs. It's really easy to plug and play technology, but it's not so easy to build those agile business relationships. And that, you know, that was the challenge. And so here's this huge trend of cloud, like everybody, so you know that, and it just like connects immediately. I've got these partners and they're not. So that just another aspect I would bring to category creation is it's got to be part of it, and you need to be able to articulate that as well.
Right, and that's a great point. When in the early days of my career, I worked on packaged goods products, and if you were a leader in the category, you actually probably created the category, like a Kleenex, right? They actually created the category, and everybody else is competing with them. And so what you ended up doing, the rule of thumb was you sold the category, right? If you were, and this goes way back, and it gets interesting when you think about Kodak, they were the film category, right? I mean, Kodak doesn't exist anymore, but for a good 100 years, that was billions of dollars worth of business. They owned the category. And so what did Kodak sell? They sold memories. They sold the notion of taking pictures. They didn't say, hey, buy Kodak instead of Fuji. They didn't have to bother. They had 90% of the category. So, and there's a long-winded way of saying, sell the category. Tell me about that and what you're doing and things that, and I know, for example, Chip, and this comes up, you have a podcast where you feature people who are leading in this area. Talk a little bit about the mindset of the marketer and the things that you do that are different, because you're selling the category, right? You're just not putting up, your speeds and feeds versus somebody else's. You're saying there's a new trend, there's a new way of doing things. So talk a little bit about that in terms of the difference.
Yeah, I think, I mean, in our case, it's it was, and it was actually one of our, in the 10-step category, our 10-step plan was to, identify and bring along these sort of fellow thinkers, fellow travelers along this journey, people that are having in pain, not really, just haven't had the attention of anyone, right? They've been sort of out there struggling on themselves, doing things, spreadsheets, and let's, bring those stories to light. Let's we created a community, a place for people to share things, share those stories, and again, just sort of make heroes out of those people broadly. I mean, the podcast is not just is in fact, many are not customers. It's really about people that are in this space and doing their best with the challenges that they have.
Yeah. And I think that's so great. The fact is they don't have to be customers. That's the part of this thing that you're thinking about. You're thinking about category. And Gabi, I know that you did, and we talked about this on the show, you created an event, I mean, out of nothing, and brought a bunch of people together with the first Emotion AI conference, 2017?
Yeah, exactly. And but very similar to what Chip was just describing, right? You build an ecosystem of like-minded people and supporters, and those can be your clients, but don't always have to be your clients. You bring them together, and we did exactly that with the Emotion AI Summit. And in a virtual world, we just shifted to digital events. And like you, Drew, we got super crafty with live streams like this. We were able to get amazing people, and to this day get amazing people on because it's very accessible. And we're just basically keep pounding the pavement, but not just us talking about it. We're bringing others in that we have conversations with about the bigger category.
So, Bernd, we've talked about podcasts, we've talked about events. Is there some other sort of thing in your playbook that you go to as part of an executional part of making sure that you build this category effectively?
Yeah, it's very similar to what Gabi and Chip said. Like, it's a similar playbook in regards to creating our own industry conference. We've done that face-to-face. Now we're doing it virtually. We have podcast series. We talked about this notion of creating content and bringing the broader ecosystem together to like chip in. As I mentioned earlier, we use a lot of customers to give the message. So not us always preaching, but letting our customers tell the story. So that's a big part of what we do. So it's not dissimilar to what Chip and Gabi are doing as well.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you, Chip, Gabi, Bernd. You're great sports and amazing category creators. Thank you, Courtney and Waterloo, for your fantastic number 9 gin. Thank you to the audience for staying with us. Please join us in 2 weeks when we'll be talking about cybersecurity for marketers with Dan Loudon, Kevin Sellers, and Armin Najarian. And let's cue that music. Renegade Thinkers Live is produced by Melissa Caffrey. Our intern is Charlotte McVoy. Our botanical expert is Nicole Hernandez. For show notes and past episodes, please visit renegade.com, home of quite possibly the savviest B2B marketing agency in New York City. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.